Have you ever wondered what it would be like to generate a semi-passive income from a business that you love and bought with little to none of your own money? How would it feel if you could finally buy that restaurant, salon, or any business for that matter without having to worry about where you were going to get the money from? Think of the lifestyle that would provide for you, your family, and even your retirement. These are the results that my good friend Ed Keels provides at his company, Beyond Breakeven. He provides world-class coaching on how to structure leverage buyouts for any business so that you can buy it without putting your own personal credit or net worth at risk. He's bought and sold over 25 companies personally over the course of his career and structured many more deals on the behalf of clients. And now he wants to help you learn over 100 ways to buy a business with none of your own money. And he also wants to teach you how to earn a six-figure income, helping others do that exact same thing. So if you're ambitious and interested in buying a business with none of your own money, visit profitarchitects.com and give that number on the page a call, or fill out the request info form and they'll get back to you. Make sure you mention referral code MEMS for a special offer. Now, back to the episode.
Welcome back to Abundant Culture Podcast,
where we dissect the mindsets and tactics of the true beast of business.
People like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, and Warren Buffett.
All to create a blueprint to experience life more abundantly.
Hi, Ed. Thank you again for coming on to part 2 on the podcast. And not a lot of people get part 2s, but you were so much of a wealth of knowledge in the first part of our episode with you. So we already got into your story last time. All the listeners, if you want to hear his backstory, you can go back to episode 49 to hear that great episode. Today, we really wanted to focus on some more content, especially the different business entities. But before we got into that, we had to ask a couple more questions following up from the part 1 that we didn't get a chance to answer last time. So the first question we had was, what is the first step to buying a business?
Okay. If you follow the traditional route that you think you should, and the gravitational pull of a broker, because they're the so-called professional in this industry, then you're going down the wrong path. We talked in the last episode about how business brokers only have a 10% success rate. There's something wrong with your process if 90% of the time it turns into nothing. Your efforts do.
Yeah.
But here's what happens. Our brains, just in general, in trying to make sense of life, anything in life, we go, have I ever seen anything like this before? And it may not even be a conscious thing. And then we go, well, yeah, it's a big ticket item, the business purchase. There's a broker involved most of the time. There's buyer, there's seller, there's going to be a big loan, just like real estate. But so it's very easy to do things that feel good, that are common sense, and especially when the broker's telling you they're the right things, but they're all wrong. The most, I guess, in-your-face example would be real estate's cold and it's impersonal. When you're buying a home, you're looking for reasons to offer less and have the seller go, yeah, they're right. Right? They would have to replace that roof. It's 15 years old. They would have to replace the floor. It's damaged or stained. So the seller is really kind of reticent and just waiting for that shoe to fall of how low ball is this now potential buyer going to be?
Yeah.
You can be insulting in real estate. It comes with the turf.
Yeah.
You cannot do that in business. So the first step is understanding that you cannot negotiate the price. It's probably already priced fairly to begin with, so it's foolish to do so. But you cannot insult the seller. this is their life's work many times. They've worked, either started it or took over something that was little and they grew it to something great. They've been there 10, 20, 30 years. Their kids have worked there. And you come in and insult them, they're not selling to you. They should not care what happens to their employees, their business, their legacy, their suppliers, even once they leave there. But they care a great deal. Most people are not leaving town, and they'd like to see what they created succeed. And there's much more of that in them than any one of them realize or would admit. Yeah. So the most important thing is understanding this is like walking the daughter down the aisle at her wedding. They got to like the groom, or that wedding's not being paid for, and it's just not happening. Not with their blessing. So, and in my estimation here, 60% of getting a deal done is getting the seller to like you, trust you, and believe you're the perfect people to buy their business and leave their baby in the hands of. Yeah. That make sense?
Yep.
Yes, definitely. And I really like how you mentioned that the emotional side of it, because I don't think a lot of people necessarily see that side. I've been in a process of buying a couple businesses. One deal that actually did not go through was we couldn't figure out the financing. But I remember that deal being it was 2 salons. And I just remember how emotional that seller was. And, you know, if you have the broker tell the story, you know, he was telling us that, oh, I don't know what you said or what you did, but she feels like she has to sell to you guys. And, you know, they were saying how they had better offers, but she wanted to sell specifically to us.
To my point. And that happens all the time. Not to interrupt you, but to stay on course here, it's an extremely important point. I hear that all the time. We've got some offers that are better, but we don't like those people. See, that's the point. They have to like you and trust you. It trumps money. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what happened with your deal?
So honestly, we just really couldn't figure out the financing portion of it because the SBA didn't want to finance it. And that's all we really knew at the time. And, you know, the only other option I knew was a combination of owner financing and, you know, private money from investors. And we couldn't necessarily really get it to click. And it really kind of shows because I believe when I looked at that business recently, she still owns it. Like she still has that company, and I don't think she was.
Well, she's got a broker. There's a 90% chance she'll never sell it with his help. That's what the statistics say.
Especially that guy. Especially that guy. So when people, is there anything somebody should look for when they're like they made the decision that, you know, for like me, for example, you know, I realized, I like real estate, but it's not my thing. If I had to pick my thing, I don't think it's real estate. I need to get into buying businesses. Is there anything that really a person buying a business should really stay away from, or anything that they should be really, really like looking for? Like in real estate, there's, you know, all these red flags. Like, are there any red flags in businesses too, or is it just the Wild West?
Not initially. Initially, what I counsel clients to focus on is 2 things. One, chase those businesses that you love. If you look at it and you go, wow, Jasmine, look, we could run, wouldn't it be fun for us to run this business? This would be awesome. You could see yourselves doing it every day, being engaged, proud to tell somebody you owned it. If that's not there, I wouldn't buy it at any cost, because the problem is once you buy something and you buy it just for the money, and there's no passion, there's no real interest behind that, it becomes the next job you learn to hate.
Yeah.
You can get accustomed to the income very quickly, but then there's nothing there. And buying a business is a life-changing thing. I mean, it changes everything about a person's life in an instant. Their self-worth, how they run their days.
Yeah.
How, if you're a person, not a morning person, you don't have to get a job where you have to be at work at 8:00. You come in at 10. There are people that'll do that 2 hours of work for you. But you change your life. You decide how much money you're worth and how much the business can pay you. You decide everything. And if you're doing what you love, man, that's just a home run, because you also, when you do what you love, generate all the creativity, all the energy necessary to be wildly successful. I mean, my kids joke all the time. They say, Dad, you got to get a life, because I'm business. I'm all about business, but I love it. Yeah. I mean, I'll take on a client sometimes. A client calls 7, 8 o'clock at night. I've been at my desk since 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm wound up because I know what's in store for them. I can't help but get wound up. It's hard to go to bed. 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'm in bed and I'm reading a business book. It's not work. So number one criteria is do that thing that you love, because then all the stuff comes naturally to be successful, the creativity, the energy, et cetera.
Absolutely.
The second is pay no attention to the money that is listed in an ad, whether it's from a seller or a broker. The bottom line numbers referred to as the bottom line, the net profit, the net pre-tax profit, the owner's discretionary income, the owner's benefit, whatever it is, you pay no attention to it. Do not use that number to dismiss a deal and not get more information, or to get excited about it because it would change your life, because the number will never be right. When we dive in and do forensic accounting and find out where all the dead bodies are buried, and we go through the real financials and understand what's really going on there, the numbers will never be the same. If an ad says there's $100,000 worth of profit, there might be 50, but there just as easily might be 150. Yeah. Because brokers screw up both ways. And there's sloppy, and there's intentional cooking of the books always, because owners don't report all the income, but they don't know exactly how much. And then there's also unintentional cooking of the books, which is in every deal, sloppy accounting. Yeah. So those things make changes for the good and the bad, the pluses and the minuses of a deal. And it's only after you get through all of that can you really see a deal for what it's worth. So don't use the preliminary numbers to get excited or to dismiss anything. The only thing I tell people is, when it comes to numbers, pay attention to the asking price, because the place where we have the sweet spot, where you have the most businesses available, the 90% that have not gotten a deal because the broker hasn't helped them, where they're most agreeable and wanting to sell their business and willing to work with you, and where we have the highest probability of being able to do 100% funding, is in an asking price of between 100 and 400,000. That's the only thing I ask people to pay attention to in numbers. Can we look at something for 5 or 6 or 700 or 1.5 million? Sure. But the plethora of deals are in that fish pond where they're stocked with fish that are 100 to 400,000.
Absolutely. So another question I have, and I think this kind of relates to that asking price that you were speaking of. When I was taking your the free training that you offer on your website, shameless plug, it is brilliant. I mean, to offer that much free training up front, I think is just absolutely awesome. But when I was taking that, you mentioned that if you just go off of a multiple of cash flow, that's not a full evaluation. And if you just go off of assets, that's not a full evaluation either. So, and this is something that I even, I thought I kind of knew, but then I found out that I didn't know it at all. I was wondering, how do you actually value a business? Like, what weight do you put to assets versus cash flow and all those different types of things?
Okay, so I think in part one I gave this example, but I think it bears repeating. most people will call the smartest financial guy they know, their tax preparer, say, how do I price this? If they care about getting any guidance. Most of them don't. Most of them just price it because I know how much I put in. I know how long I've worked here. I know what I want to get out of it. And I know I still have to pay off that second mortgage and that visa that I personally charged up.
Yeah.
$300,000. It has nothing to do with the value of the performance of the business. Or if they do call somebody, they call the smartest financial guy they know, their tax preparer. And he's typically not a business valuator. If he is, he's got more letters after his name than CPA. And most of them are not. And so the answer is, they told us in school, use a multiple of 5 times earnings. And again, the example is busy hot dog cart, New York City makes $100,000 a year, 5 times profit says you sell it for $500,000. What? It's a hot dog cart.
Yeah.
Or maybe we have a heavy equipment company that does Department of Transportation work. Got $8 million worth of earth movers and dozers and whatever, and it makes $100,000 profit. 5 times earnings says it should sell for $500,000. What do you do with the $8 million worth of equipment and furniture, fixtures, and stuff it takes to produce that?
Yeah.
So it's more complicated. In valuing businesses, we use the most widely respected and utilized formulas for valuing businesses and method. This method's used probably a couple thousand times or more a day, every day across America. And so it employs 5 different formulas that take into consideration some weighted factors for cash flow, multiples of cash flow, or how important are the assets. We use 5 formulas because there's a slight differing of opinion as to what means more and is more valuable. For instance, if we're in the portion of one of the calculations that deals with multiples of earnings, we may have one that uses a factor of 3.25 times earnings, and another one might use a factor of 4 or 3.5. The slight differing of opinions. Then we do a simple average of the 5 values, and then we will do a weighted average where we'll throw out the low value and the high value, just like they do in the Olympic springboard diving competition to keep the Romanian judge honest, make sure he's not on the take or, biased in any way. They throw out the high and the low, and then you have an average of the 3 remaining values. That usually throws out or takes care of any renegade formula that might be skewing our results.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you have to get to the formulas to work. You have to get to the real cash flow of the business, which requires forensic accounting and undoing of the tax accounting and filling in the blanks for the sloppy accounting. And then we have to get to what is the useful value of the assets that are being sold to me in the deal, like a desk. A desk is worth $200. That's it. I don't care if you bought it new yesterday for $500 at Office Depot. Its useful value as it sits in that business is $200. I don't care if it's fully depreciated by the IRS and it's worth nothing according to the IRS. There it sits, and it's being used every day in that business. It's worth $200. I don't care if it's wood out of a schoolhouse. I don't care if it's gunmetal gray out of a military facility, brand spanking new from Office or Home Depot, $200. But there's a way to look at those assets, and it's way beyond what the time we have here today. But that's a relatively short answer.
Okay, awesome. So is there like some maybe sheet or something that you could find maybe on the IRS website that'll tell you the useful value of those assets, or are they something that you kind of got to come up with?
No, it's something that you got to let me teach you. And that just comes from I've done over 1,000 valuations out in the field, physically in somebody's building. And I can't even count. I've probably done 1,000 a year for 17 years. So it's an experience thing.
Oh, for sure.
I'll give you, because there are some nuances, and here would be one. My son, I found a little pizza place. I was doing the valuation for the seller, And before I could tell him, congratulations, your place is worth $150,000. He said, I just want 10 grand. I said, excuse me?
Okay.
10 grand?
We'll go get
He
that.
said, yeah. He said, I'm a landlord. I own this building and I own all these buildings on this strip. I don't need to be making pizzas all day, every day. I'm tired of this. 10 grand. I closed my portfolio, packed up all my paperwork, and I said, I'll be back. I never told him what it was worth. I called my son at college. I said, you're in your last semester of college. Would you like to own one of these places that you've been managing your whole college career? He managed a Papa John's and a Taco Bell and other pizza places. And he said, yeah. Well, 30 days later, I put him in that place with none of his own money, $10,000, and it was worth $150 the day he bought it. Those deals are out there. So I was doing the valuation, walking through and doing what anyone has to do and making a list of things that are included in the sale. That's something most brokers do not do. You'll see it on occasion, and it's even a rarer occasion when you see any values that the broker would put on those things.
Yeah.
So you have to walk the building and you have to make a list of everything that's included in the sale, attach it to the buyout agreement. Otherwise, you just have no expectation that those things will be there after you close. Mm-hmm. So walking the property, found this 5-foot tall dough mixer. And I said, okay, tell me about that. And the guy said, well, we bought it new 2 years ago for 15 grand. And I said, okay, fine. And I looked it over, and this is what you have to do. No frayed wires, no chip paint, no rust, clean as a whistle. He said, we drag it out, a couple times a week, we make dough and put it away. It looked exactly like that's how they had treated it. Because that thing has a lifespan of like 30 to 50 years. Oh, I mean, it's just a big gray motor and it works. There's no reason to create a better mousetrap. So it works. It's worked for 30 to 50 years. It's going to work for 30 to 50 more. Nobody's going to come out with a whiz-bang mixer that's any better that you have to have. So I dropped 10% off of the top of the value of that original value to get to the useful value as it sits. Mm-hmm. Because it has a lifespan of 30 to 50 years, I just dropped $1,500 off of it and valued it at $13,500.
Okay.
Nobody has to be happy with the hard asset value except the buyer. If he doesn't think that stuff's worth it, because that's, and you can't screw that up, because almost always, the asset portion of a business is the smallest portion of the overall value of the business. In fact, when the $1,000 of assets goes through the formulas and comes out the other side, the formulas we were talking about a minute ago, you don't even get full $1,000 value. You get like $900. You get 90 cents on a dollar. Mm. So we think about that hair salon. Do you remember the net pre-tax profit they were making?
It was 150.
Yeah. It was
okay.
150.
Yeah.
So 150. If I go through and I look at chairs, mirrors, some stations that maybe are a small piece of furniture that hold combs and hairbrushes and hair dryers, and a front desk and a little bit of seating, there's not $10,000 worth of furniture, fixtures, equipment in that building. Mm-hmm. And it's used, depreciated state. Mm-hmm. You got some signage, $5,000 if it's a lit sign out front. The whole hard asset value, and maybe they have $500 to $1,000 worth of product on a shelf for retail. Mm-hmm. There's not even close to $20,000 in assets. But a business that makes $150,000 a year net pre-tax profit with that asset base is worth about $500,000.
Oh, wow. And that's what they were selling it for.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit more, but then it went down.
They tried to get more, and we were like, because what happened was that they were making a little bit more than that 150 when we looked at the older tax returns, and then it dropped to 150, and we were like,
well, see, here's an important point. So a business valuation is a snapshot. of the financial worth of a business at a particular point in time.
Mhm.
They're going to tell you, oh, we were doing such and such, but here's why we didn't do it. We stopped our advertising and our best person left us and we had to rebuild. There's always a reason.
Yeah.
So what? But you can't buy a business. I've seen some brokers that'll average the past 3 years. No. What happened 3-4 years ago has nothing to do with the value of the business today. You run that thing in the ground, which is one of the reasons why traditional lenders will run from a deal if they see declining revenue. All they got to do is look at the top line, and then there's no loan. Why would they try and stop a runaway train? But at any rate, back to the point, assets are the smallest portion usually of a sale. And in that case, it's exactly that. So you got maybe $20,000 worth of hard assets. What about the $480,000 that you're buying? What do you call that?
And that's what I was going to ask you.
That's the goodwill. And you don't just arbitrarily throw a goodwill number on there. It's measurable. If people like you, and they say, well, we're well respected in the community. If people don't spend money with you, so what? That's like the most expensive reputation ever. Yeah. But if they like you and they spend money with you, well, then that goodwill is measurable. Mm-hmm. And that's what goes into the formulas. It comes out the other side as some multiple of earnings that is usually between 3 and 4.2 times the dollar of cash.
Okay.
So that's why we're very careful to get to the real cash flow of the business, but we're a little loose on the value of the asset side because it makes such a small impact.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And with top line revenue sales, that's just totally disregarded, correct?
Means nothing. I had a lady, and people all the time say, oh, top line sales are this. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a little lady 15 years ago in South Florida, had a great little curio shop, sold sundries. And she said, well, I must be doing something right. I do $1 million a year every year in sales for the last 10 years. I said, yeah, but you lose $50,000 a year doing it. It's not a business. It's a hobby and not even a good one. Yeah. Top line means nothing.
For sure.
It helps me. I just bought a restaurant, actually closing today in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Come eat with us if you live there. It's called Two Samuels. And when we looked at the financials, for the first look, the top line means something to me because I understand the relationship and the numbers. In business buying and managing, it's the relationship of the numbers that you care about. The top line means nothing. So, not nothing. It's their top line was $800,000 in income. Kind of, sort of, not really. Every night, the seller's friends gathered there. They wine them, they dine them, they eat, they drink for free. 6 or 8 guests. They never charge them a penny. So the real cash flow or income in the business is not 800. It's north of there. And it's always north of there because the favorite technique of business owners for reducing their tax liability is, I'm just not going to report all this income and nobody will be the wiser. So you got that number too. But 800 tells me the minimum income of that business is 800,000. Then I look at their bottom line to see how well it's run. Restaurants should run a 20% bottom line profit. When I run that restaurant, that $800,000 will produce $160,000 of profit. Mm-hmm. There's only $34,000 on their tax return. That's why you pay no attention to the money that they say is the bottom line, because it's never right. What's the difference between the 34 and the 160 it should be? Well, they're giving it away to family and friends every night. You have the employees go, they're not paying for anything. Why should I? So employees are eating and drinking for free. They're throwing cases of steaks out the back door because nobody's checking on anything. The owner's not reporting all the income. And really, when we get done with the forensic accounting, there's probably more like $1 million worth of revenue That's why the top line doesn't mean a lot. But I know $1 million in revenue, when I run it properly, is going to translate into $200,000 worth of profit. Not 34.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That makes so much sense.
All right, so we are back. Alrighty, so now we really need to jump into the meat and potatoes why everybody is here today. And the question that we have for you is, what are the different business entities that are out there, and what are the differences between all of them? Okay,
so, well, you guys know I have a over 2-hour education on this. We're going to try and squeeze this in to hit the high points, and we will. So when you go into business, you have to have some kind of structure. Mm-hmm. You have to make a decision as to how you're going to operate and by what rules. So your entity choice changes everything. Your entity choice dictates the rules you have to play by. So, So if you're a sole proprietor, it's just you. You're the business. It's the easiest one to form, but it's the one that gives you the least of everything. Least of asset protection, the least funding options, the least amount of personal protection, et cetera. Mm-hmm. It's just you starting a business. Mm-hmm. Never, ever, ever recommend that. There's just no advantage other than it's the easiest, the cheapest, but that's really, really short-sighted because it's the one that puts you at the most risk. Absolutely. Secondly, you have a partnership. It's just two sole proprietors get together and they're partners. It would be you two. Mm-hmm. Again, least amount of advantages in every way, shape, and form. And the way we're going to compare the entities, the three major entity choices that are really viable are asset protection or level of, the risk that you have that's involved, the personal risk, the funding options that you have. Most people don't realize that your entity choice will help or restrict the options you have in funding and in financing building blocks, if you will. Wow. And then tax reduction strategies would be the last one. Mm-hmm. So sole proprietor, most risky and little to no advantages. Partnership, not much more than exactly what a sole prop is. Mm-hmm. So the three options that are pushed all the time are LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company. Now, I've heard, you've seen these TV judges. Yeah. I'm not going to name any of them because I don't want them to sue me. But I've heard one of the most famous ones in a case she was presiding over referred to the LLC as a limited liability corporation. It's not. It's two different things. Really? So a limited liability company, the definition is that it's an entity that is afforded the same protections that corporations are. It's a partnership, first and foremost, that is afforded the same protections that corporations are. That was the intention, but that's not exactly the way it panned out. Mm-hmm. LLCs came about, let's go back in history, when we had savings and loans along with banks in this country. And there was this huge bubble because all of the savings and loans had made these deals that were based on the good old boy network. Oh, yeah, that's Billy Bob. Yeah, I know him. He's got a farm right down the street. Yeah, he's got the liquor store too. Yeah, we make Billy Bob a loan. Based on nothing. It was kind of like the mortgage, bubble of 2008. It's just if you knew somebody, yeah, you could get money. And so when all that fell apart, the government stepped in and liquidated all of those assets and did away with all the savings and loans. To take that place of that void in the marketplace, LLCs were created. They're partnerships because that's the way that business was done then.
Mhm.
They were limited partnerships financed by the savings and loans. All that goes away, so you need a new plan. LLCs with a new structure. The problems come into play when every state passes their own set of laws regarding LLCs. So there are 50 different laws, sets of laws. So while you might be clean and neat and legal and compliant with LLC law in Illinois, if you have an LLC, if you sold me something and I'm in Tampa, Florida, I needed some kind of cog or wheel for one of my machines, and you sell it to me, but you don't make it. You're just a distributor. And so you get it from a machine shop in Pennsylvania, and they drop ship it to me. It breaks, it kills one of my employees or seriously hurts them. I'm suing. You may be clean and neat with LLC law in Illinois, but not in Pennsylvania and certainly not in Florida. Yeah, the lawsuit's going to be in the state that's convenient for me, who's filing the lawsuit. Yeah. And while you may be legal and compliant with all LLC laws in your state, maybe not in mine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets complicated. There's so little case law in the books and judges, because it takes 2 years to get a case heard. So there's a backlog.
Yeah.
And you have judges and attorneys who are just not familiar with LLC law, let alone LLC law in every state, let alone the default rules. The default rules are this. In an LLC, you're supposed to make up your operating agreement.
Mm-hmm.
What? That's what they tried to give you the latitude. But, I had a professor in college, and we were all complaining about his test. It was horrendous. And it was a world cultures class. And he said, or no, we were in anthropology or something. He said, well, just be glad you're not in my world cultures class. And we all said, what the hell's that got to do with anything? And he said, well, I told him they've been looking at the world the entire semester. Your test is to draw it. Draw the world? Okay. Well, to me, that's make your own LLC agreement. What goes in that? I'll take you back to my son's pizza place story, for example.
Wow.
Everything rocked along great. He brought a partner with him, his college roommate. I didn't know he was going to do a partner, so they did a partnership. Paid no attention to dad, that's fine. and that rocked along just great, which is LLC is a partnership. Rocked along great for about 3 years until the partner realized that he really loved alcohol, drugs, women, and gambling. And he would go use the company Visa check card and take out the maximum daily withdrawal, take it to the casino, spend all night there, and come in late to work the next day. Meanwhile, my son's in the office writing checks for rent and utilities, some of which are going to bounce. Who's the criminal? That's my son. He doesn't know the money's not there. Both partners are entitled to the money.
Wow.
It's not embezzlement. In a corporate structure, it would be embezzlement. At any rate, so back to the legalities and of FedEx has prohibited the use of an LLC by any one of its independent route owners. A lot of people don't know FedEx will charge you a specific amount of money to buy a territory. They'll give you decals and say, now go buy your trucks, put these on your trucks, hire your drivers, drive around in this area, pick up and deliver, and we'll send you a check for that every month. You can't be an LLC and do business with FedEx that way. They prohibit it. I know why. I suspected why, and I talked to their legal department and got confirmation. It's because they're involved in a lawsuit in every state, every day of the year.
Wow.
And so they're having to mount 50 different defense strategies because there are 50 different sets of laws. So when you have to write your own operating agreement, there are things you won't think about. And back to my son's example, how could you possibly think that your partner would go off the deep end and have a drug and an alcohol abuse problem and a gambling problem and a womanizer problem and be taking money out of the company? And how do you write a rule against that or how to handle it? Does that make sense? You can't think of everything that your potential partners would do. People get crazy in business, especially when there's money.
I bet.
So at any rate, two little cases on the books. The default rules are crazy too. If you don't know what the default rules are, and most people don't even know they exist, it's the state put in guidelines and rules for how certain things should be handled if you didn't think about it and put it in your operating agreement. In Pennsylvania, for example, one of the default rules is that the company is managed by the members, and and the voting rights are per capita, meaning per person. So if the three of us owned an LLC together, and I owned 80%, and I put 80% of the money in, and you each own 10%, you could outvote me on everything. Because your two votes are stronger than my one, even though I put in all the money. I guarantee you talk to a Pennsylvania attorney, most of them wouldn't have a clue that there were default rules. If you talk to legal discounters, I'm not going to use the name, but they, because I don't want them to sue me, it's a discount legal site, and they do LLCs and S-Corps and C-Corps. You're not going to get that counsel there either. But imagine that you have to go to court, and then all of a sudden you find out you never had control of your company. Mm-hmm. Now, if you know what the default rules are and you can make rules against them, that's fine. But why? When you go to court, it's a crapshoot. The judges don't understand it. Your attorney doesn't understand it. The other attorney doesn't understand it. And so really it's a roll of the dice, and that's never a way to go to court.
Absolutely.
So LLCs are the one that affords you the least protection because courts don't understand them.
Right.
And because there's 50 different sets of laws in different states. You can do business across state lines. You have that problem. You have to create your own operating agreement. Some of the states don't even require that you have regular meetings and document anything. Well, then it's he said, she said. It's like a rape case.
Yeah.
How do you settle that if you have no documentation?
Yeah.
Corporations, whether they be S or C, are treated uniformly across the entire United States when it comes to a legal perspective. They've been around for hundreds of years. And so there are set procedures and ways and court cases for hundreds of years to document the way courts have ruled in certain cases. Mm-hmm. So LLC, least comfortable. But it's the one, if you go and talk, and this is not an empirical study, it's just experience talking to thousands upon thousands of business owners. It's typically an attorney that recommended an LLC for the asset protection. Really? So that's nothing like asset protection. So two of them will recommend S-Corp, which moves us now from, are also still in asset protection. The most audited of the entities is an LLC. Now, to be fair, it's probably the law of large numbers. There are more LLCs than there are anything else. So they're going to get the most audits. But still, they get the most audits. S-Corp, my accountant told me 10 years ago, the IRS stepped up their audits of S-Corps because of suspected abuse. So they're the second most audited. I don't want to be in either one of those companies. Okay, so moving on from asset protection to tax reduction strategies and liability. An LLC and an S-Corp are referred to as flow-through entities. The monies from an S-Corp or an LLC flow straight through to the owners. Owners of an LLC are called members. Owners of a corporation are called shareholders. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking with an attorney, he'll tell you 8 out of 10 of them, I promise you, will say you need to be an LLC because of the asset protection. 2 of them will say you need to be S-Corp because of tax reduction strategies. If you talk to CPAs, the reverse is pretty much the truth. 8 will tell you S-Corp, 2 will tell you LLC, because they're speaking from their education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it be legal or tax.
Yeah.
And they will tell you with a straight face that you want either one of those because they are flow-through entities, because the profits of the corporation or the LLC flow straight through to you, the owners. That's not exactly true. What is true is the reporting of the profits, not the actual profits, flow straight through to you. Now, why is that important? Well, it might help you and or your viewers, listeners, to write LLC, S-Corp, and then C-Corp, 3 columns on a piece of paper, and you can jot down notes underneath these. So if we had $100,000 of income, we put that down underneath, and by income, I mean pre-tax. So we add up all the income of the business, we subtract all the expenses, we got $100,000 bottom line. If we compare what happens to each one of them, then it starts to make a little more sense as to how taxation affects your entity choice, or your entity choice affects the taxation. So in an S-Corp or an LLC, you're going to see the bottom line of the first page, lines 20-ish and on, are the tax section. You will never see anything in the tax section of an LLC or an S-Corp filing, ever. I've seen it once, and I've looked at tens of thousands of returns over 25 years. You'll never see anything. Why? Who pays the tax on that $100,000? You do. Mm-hmm. The owners of the LLC or the S-Corp. What happens with the $100,000 is the LLC or the S-Corp does not pay its tax. It is a business entity which is separate from you and distinct from you, does not pay tax. The owners do. So what happens is the $100,000 gets transferred to what's called a K-1 statement. That K-1 statement will have your names on it as the owners, either members or shareholders. And you got to treat it like it's a W-2 or a 1099, in that it's an earnings statement. And you have to put that $100,000 on your personal income tax return. And you personally are responsible for the taxes of your business. Let that sink in for just a minute. You are personally responsible. In fact, when you file S-Corp paperwork, one of the rules to actually be granted S-Corporation status is every one of the shareholders has to agree to be personally responsible for the taxes. Okay? So imagine if you had some shareholders who invested in you, and at the end of the year, your company made $100,000 profit, and instead of getting a profit-sharing check, a dividend check, because you don't dividend in S-Corps, they get a tax bill. They get a K-1. So here's what happens to that $100,000. Oh, they're going to run you out of town on a rail. They're going to be very upset because you didn't. It's not an investment. It reminds me of the book "How I Turned $1 Million into $100,000." So instead of profit, they get a tax bill. So in the LLC and S-Corp, flow through. The profits don't flow through. The reporting does. And here's what's worse: when your tax preparer says you made $100,000, you don't have $100,000 in the bank ever, because not everything that you do is considered tax deductible. Mm-hmm. You spent money, but you couldn't write it off. Travel, entertainment, subject to a 50% deduction. You only get half of that, because arguably the IRS says you got the value of the other half if you're entertaining someone for dinner. Mm-hmm. So if only half of your you spent $30,000 a year in advertising, entertaining and promotion, trying to get new customers, new accounts, you only write off $15,000. Well, that means your tax return says you made 100, but you got 85 in the bank.
That's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to pay tax on the 100, and you're going to pay it personally. But remember, when you're doing your tax return, don't you have to pay income tax on all of your income? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Jasmine has a W-2, either from the salon you bought or from some other business or a job she has, and she makes 50 grand. And then Joseph, you make 50 grand in a W-2 from, again, the salon or some other business endeavor or some other job. Well, you got to add up your W-2, that's 100 grand, plus the 100 grand K1 from the business. So you're going to pay taxes at the $200,000 tax bracket level. So on the 50 that you made, Jasmine, you're going to pay it at the $200,000 tax bracket level. On the 50 you made, Joseph, you're going to pay it at the $200,000 tax bracket level. On the $100,000 of K1, that there's only 85 in your bank, can you take the whole 85? No, you leave the company penniless without working capital. So people in that example typically take about $20,000. They actually took 20 grand home. But what are you going to pay tax on? The 20 grand you actually took home, the 85 you have in the bank, or the 100,000 your tax preparer says you made? The 100,000. But you're going to pay it at the $200,000 tax bracket level because you have to add up all of your income to get to that bracket. It doesn't take much to get to the bracket. The new tax brackets that were established in 2018, the new Trump tax laws, would have an individual taxpayer at 32% when you hit 157,000 cumulative.
Wow.
You're at 32%, 35% when you're 200 or over. It doesn't take much if you have two salons and some paychecks and other business interest for you to be in a 34% or more tax bracket.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you're personally responsible for the taxes of your business. Oh my God, is that anything like asset protection?
That doesn't sound like it.
Why would an attorney ever recommend this? Because here's the real risk. Businesses go out of business.
Yeah.
And when they do, the last thing they pay is the tax bill. Now, they'll pay the sales tax because the sales tax guys, state tax, will lock your door in about 10 days. I don't care what state. They are brutal. But the Fed, they'll let you go forever. I was watching a broadcast of a congressional hearing with members of the IRS one day. Yeah, I know. Got to get a life, Ed. And they asked one of the representatives, two of the representatives, what's the standard operating procedure when you find a mistake in a return? And you would think they say, well, we notify the filer right away, let them make sure they take care of their business. No. The astounding response was, quote, we allow some age to get on that file so it will accrue penalties and interest. Mm. That's our government, and that's the standard operating procedure at the IRS.
What?
So you're struggling to pay the rent, but you pay the rent, you keep the doors open, you're struggling to pay the payroll because employees won't come to work without paychecks. You give up a paycheck, you work extra hours, you don't pay the taxes because the IRS is not coming knocking. And you just keep putting that one off and it grows. You go out of business, you declare personal bankruptcy to wipe out most or all of your debt. Taxes don't go away in bankruptcy. And the statute of limitations on most tax issues is 10 years. So I want you to think about a scenario where you have some small kids, you're trying to teach them business, and your attorney or CPA recommended S-Corp or C-Corp, and you gave your kids some ownership, membership ownership in the LLC or shares of the S-Corp so they can understand stock shares and investing, and it's part of their business. It's only 2%. You have some investor that gave you $50,000, and so they got 10%, and you go out of business. The IRS will hunt down every one of those people, including your children and your investors, for 10 years because the taxes don't go away in bankruptcy court. Is that anything like asset protection?
Nope.
When you give the IRS a lightning bolt connection to your business bank account, your personal account, that's nothing like asset protection.
Yeah.
So the only clear winner here is C-Corp. C-Corp is the only entity where you got nothing to do with it. If you go out of business owing tens of thousands of dollars worth of tax, The business goes out of business. You never signed on to be responsible for the taxes of that corporation. So the IRS has no standing to come after you. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on and to the new tax laws. The Trump tax laws passed 2 years ago. Most people have no understanding of. Even CPAs, I've questioned them, which is shameful. You need to know your craft.
Yeah.
But they passed a temporary law for the benefit of S-Corps and LLCs. That temporary law will expire. And what we know about temporary laws is most oftentimes they're not replaced with anything. Obama ran on a platform of, quote, if elected, I will allow the Bush tax cuts to expire. And he did. And it's never been addressed again. One of those tax laws was regarding long-term capital gains on stock investments. That's investment for average person with pension plans, IRAs, whatever. Well, the rate went from a 15% tax up to 20%. So Obama ran on a platform of, I'm going to increase your taxes, but you're not going to know it. I'm going to let the Bush tax cuts expire as if that's a good thing. Same thing here. This tax cut will expire. It's a part-time or not a permanent law. It expires just a few years. The law says you get a 20% deduction off of whatever your bottom line income is. So you have $100,000 in my example here. If you're an S-Corp or LLC, you get to take $20,000 off of that. You'll pay tax on 80, but you're still going to pay tax on money you never got. And it's still going to add to your personal income and drive your personal bracket up. Okay. The Trump tax laws for C corporation is a flat 21% tax, whether you make $2, $2 million, 200 million, or 200 billion. 21% flat tax.
Wow.
And again, you're not personally responsible. This is why immediately upon the announcement of those tax cuts, you saw businesses in America repatriate their money in their businesses and give business owner or their employees bonuses for the first time in decades, because they knew if they're going to come down from a 39 or more percent tax down to 21%, they're going to have money to spread among the employees to make them happy, and they're still going to be better off, still have more profit. And I hear all the time, oh, it don't be a C-Corp. That's for a big business. No, it's for anybody in America that has $100, because it costs you no more to form a C-Corp as it does an S-Corp, as it does an LLC. In every state, they're exactly the same price.
Wow.
Okay? That's a tax break for the little guy. If you want to get ahead and get rich in America, then the smartest thing you can do is do what rich people do.
Yeah.
They don't use LLCs and they don't use S-Corps. They use C-Corps. Okay. Moving on to the last. So we've covered asset protection, personal liability, tax reduction strategies. C corporations have the most tax reduction strategies of all of the entities available to you. And at the lowest tax rate, and you're not personally responsible. So it's like triple benefit. The last one is when it comes to funding, there are only some things you can do in a C Corp. You can't do them in the others. Number one, and they're powerful. One would be a retirement account rollover. Well, if you're going to roll over your retirement account, if you're going to take money out of your retirement account, let's say, you're going to lose about 50% of its value to penalties and interest. If, let's say you had $100,000 in a retirement account, if you were to roll it over into a new entity or an existing one, there's a cost for somebody to roll it over for you legally, but you get to keep 100% of that money. You get to keep the $100,000. If you took it out or decimated it, just canceled it, you wind up with $50,000. If you roll it over, you got 100. You can only do that with a C-Corp, period. So you roll over the $100,000 from your retirement account where it is to a new C corporation, and you keep all of the money, and your corporation now can use it to invest in anything. A new hair salon.
Yeah.
Right? I had some guys approach me years ago, or a guy, and he said, I work for a company, a publicly traded company, that does medical lasers, and my division does the repairs and the maintenance. And there's 17 of us, and they're trying to sell our division. We don't want to be sold. So what do you want to do? He goes, we want to buy it. Can we do that? It's like $2.5 million. I said, do any of you have retirement accounts? He goes, oh yeah, all of us. I said, how much money's in there? There's $850,000. I said, okay, fine. Here's your deal structure. We're going to roll over those accounts from where they are at this Fortune 500 company into a new C-Corp that we'll create. You'll have $850,000 that you can use for down payment and working capital for a $2.5 million SBA loan. One day they're working there. Next day they own the place, and all they had to do is move their retirement accounts.
That's crazy.
That is.
Okay. Can't do that with an LLC. Can't do that with an S-Corp. And I talk to people all the time that have grandiose dreams, and they have an attorney that says, oh yeah, you be an LLC today, and then when you grow and you get to that point, then you convert to a C-Corp. Oh, just shoot me. Do you understand everything that has to be changed and the cost of that and the agony? It's business cards, it's invoices, it's websites, it's marketing, it's legal documents, it's agreements to change. It is just stupid. And all the while, you're not taking advantage of the things that you could be that help you get to be a big company.
Right.
Want to be a big company? Act like them. Start off right. So you avail yourself of those things. When it comes to, and I hear people say, I have grandiose plans, and sometimes they have a legitimate idea that they could take that company public. It would have that. And you don't have to be a big company. There was an article a few years ago in the Tampa Trib about 4 local companies, didn't even do any more than a couple $100,000 in revenue a year, and they were publicly traded. They're a penny stock. You don't have to be a multi-million-dollar conglomerate to go public. And there's some advantages to doing that. Well, you can't take an LLC public. You just can't do it. It's not allowed. You can't take an S-Corp public. Again, with the S-Corp, all of the investors, well, there's a limited number of investors. I think the current number is probably 200. Don't quote me on that. And every one of the S-Corp owners has to be a tax-paying citizen. It can't be even somebody from Canada. Because remember, they have to agree to pay the tax liability of the corporation. So you can't take an S-Corp public. You can't take an LLC public. Okay. The other thing you can't do, you don't want to do, is sell stock in an LLC or sell ownership interest. Because the default rules in every state say the LLC is managed by the members. That's a deep relationship. Yeah. If a person just gives you $10,000 and you're doing a $500,000 acquisition, you want to give them just 2% of your company, they have a say-so. They have a voice. And in some states, the voting right is just as powerful as yours when you've got all the other money in it. In an S-Corp, they would have voting rights, period. And again, they're not going to get a dividend check. They're going to get a tax bill. They're going to get a K-1. So it's not the ideal structure to sell stock. Ray Kroc, who founded McDonald's, got to about 100 stores and couldn't pay the bills. Couldn't pay his corporation bills. Couldn't pay some payroll periods. His first executive secretary and his first general manager couldn't pay him. So he offered him stock in exchange for that week's paycheck. And in many instances, they took it. He made both of them multimillionaires. Had Ray Kroc had a C-Corp, well, if he had an S-Corp, he would have been bringing these people in as partners, or an LLC, he'd have been bringing them in as partners. Ray Kroc didn't play well with partners, and most of us don't. But if he had a C-Corp, he could have issued them that stock in exchange for their work, but he could have made those non-voting shares. So now they get compensation for their work, but they don't get a say-so in how the future of the company is going to be. Make sense?
Yeah.
A lot of times with tech companies, that's a great technique where normally would have to pay somebody with expertise $250,000 a year. You can't afford it as a fledgling startup, but they're willing to work for $50,000 plus stock. You don't want to do that in a deep relationship where they have a say-so in how the growth of your company and your vision would be.
Right.
So from a funding standpoint, C-Corp kicks ass over all of the others.
Absolutely.
I don't understand one redeeming quality of an LLC. There are people that use it and teach it in the use of real estate investing. There are some tax breaks that filter through to you personally. But if you're just in business for tax breaks, you're not in business for the right reason. We're in business to make profit first and foremost, and then protect it from taxation is a secondary thing, not a primary.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did I lose you? Was that?
No, that was good.
That was excellent.
Was a lot.
If we take the C-Corp real quick, if your C-Corp makes 21%, and then you as owners only pay taxes on your $50,000 that we talked about earlier, well, then your tax brackets, at the 50 or the 100 level, it's not at the 34%, 200,000.
Absolutely.
And it also keeps separation of business and you.
Yeah. Awesome. And one last question I wanted to ask here is there a different maintenance costs for these different entities, or are they all the same maintenance costs or similar?
Okay. So some states require no documentation for an LLC whatsoever. You don't have to have meetings. You don't have to have anything. But again, we've talked earlier about how foolish that is. If you don't, when you go to court, there's an old saying, whoever has the most paper wins. If you have no paper, it's best of recollection, and any attorney worth their salt would challenge and your memory and bring psychological examples and experts in to show that our memory certainly wanes as we get older and as time passes. So not a good idea to even if you're not required to keep documentation of decisions that you make and agreements you make with your members or your shareholders. Mandatory reporting is you have a shareholders meeting once a year, and you have a board of directors meeting once a year. That if you keep those records in what's referred to as a corporate record book. In that book, you keep minutes of your meetings, copies of the stock ledger of who owns what stock and how much, bylaws and other things. It's relatively simple to do. It's, no pun intended, minutes per year. If you don't do it yourself and you leave it undone and unchecked, you will be killed in an audit. You will be killed in a lawsuit. They will do what's referred to as piercing the corporate veil, which means they've exposed that you're not keeping records showing that the business is a separate and distinct entity from you, which is wherein lies your tax and your separation and your liability separation. So if somebody sues the corporation because they slipped and fell in your place of business, they sue the corp and the lawsuit stops there. You're just a shareholder. If you own shares in Disney today and some alligator eats a kid like it did a couple of years ago, it was horrible. You wouldn't be sued personally, right? Because they're a C-Corp. It's got nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
But if you're an S-Corp, they're going to try and pierce the corp, or a small C-Corp. They're going to try and pierce that corporate veil. And in doing so, they have to show that you haven't treated the business entity as separate and distinct from you.
Yeah.
You haven't had meetings and you've treated it just like your little playhouse, and you really are the business. You're a sole proprietor just with this corporate veil up. They pierce that, and the court will let them. It's fairly easy for them to do that when you have no record keeping to show that you've had separation. So if you don't do that, you'll get killed in a lawsuit. You'll get killed in an audit. If you don't know how to do it, you don't want to do it, there are people that will do it for you. The going rate is between $1,500 and $2,000 a year, every year, to do that record keeping.
Oh, okay.
You can do it, and you should do it yourself. The big attorney trick is, we'll keep your corporate book here in our law library. You'll do that? I mean, it sits up all these other, it's amazing. You do that? Yeah, of course we'll do that, because anytime you need me to do work in it, I can bill you.
Yeah.
You should have that at home on your shelf, so that anytime you guys have a meeting. So you have to have one shareholders meeting a year. And we teach this stuff. Basically, the shareholders are the owner of the company. And so they once a year come to a shareholders meeting. They listen to the financial condition of the corporation. They listen to the plans of the board of directors of the future of the corporation. They vote for their directors. They have a Diet Coke and go home. That's it. That's it. They represent the people to take care of their interests in the business. Those are the directors.
Yeah.
So you can have that meeting anytime, anywhere you want. It just has to be once a year. The directors meeting is for board of directors that were elected by the shareholders. You have to, as a director, act in the best interest of the people that put you there, the shareholders, the owners of the company. You may be a shareholder too. Most of the time you are, but you don't have to be. You're to be a director. The directors decide the overall and strategic plan for the company, where it's going to go. Starbucks board of directors decided one time to close 300 of them. Next time they decide they're going to launch 500 of them, and with beer and wine. I mean, those are the kind of decisions that board of directors make.
Yeah.
You have to have one of those meetings a year. In the early days, anything to do with money, signing a lease, applying for any kind of credit, deciding to pay salaries, especially anything to do with money, you need to have a board of directors meeting and make those decisions and put them down in paper in your corporate record book. After you get through signing a lease, you're not going to have to address that again for 35 years. Yeah. After you apply for credit, you may not have to do that again for a long, long time, maybe all you need. So your meetings really, really slow down to the mandatory one a year, maybe two. The cool thing about that is you can have that meeting any place you want. So if you two are board of directors and you've never been to Hawaii, this year's corporate directors meeting is in Hawaii. Yeah. The business will pay for your airfare, your hotel, your food, your beverage, your ground transportation, your entertainment. 100% write-off by the corporation, not income to you. Do you remember when we had the bubble in 2008? And then the government bailed out Goldman Sachs and a few others. And then immediately they paid multi-million-dollar bonuses, and people went crazy. It's like, my tax dollars are paying for some jerk's multi-million-dollar bonus. How irresponsible. No wonder you guys, can't pay your bills. Well, nobody's gone to jail ever for any of that, as improper as that seems, but it wasn't illegal. And so they had meetings that year in Barbados and Aruba and all around the world, and they were lavish, and it was Cristal, and it was, I'm sure, just crazy debauchery. It's all perfectly legal.
Wow.
Well, it's because you can have you're a small business, use the law. You can have your meetings anywhere you want.
For sure.
That's awesome.
The reason why they were able to pay those multiple million-dollar bonuses is they were contractually bound to do so. They said, these are the quality of people we have to hire to get the returns our investors are seeking.
Absolutely.
So none of that, those expenses are illegal. You have the same laws if you form a C-Corp and same advantages as rich people and big corporations.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. And I truly appreciate you coming on to the podcast and sharing all of this valuable and really, really underrated knowledge with us. But I do want to kind of respect your time. We did go over a little bit.
We always do, right?
Yeah, we always do.
But too much to learn.
Right.
I can't stop and you won't stop me. It's just a bad combination.
This is true. That's why we're.
You'll learn more. I take this times 100, and that's what you'll learn at Profit Architects training when you two come.
Absolutely.
And for any of your listeners, the quick plug: we train people to be business brokers, business consultants, and money brokers. And the things that you learn here are tip of the iceberg. If you knew these things, you could certainly help others. You help yourself. 1/3 of my Profit Architects, my last class, bought a business for themselves before they started to use their knowledge to help anybody else. So put the oxygen mask on themselves first. But yeah, we teach you how to make over 6 figures a year in those 3 disciplines of business consulting, business brokering, and money brokering. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys there. Anybody can find more information at profitarchitects.com.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ed, for coming onto the podcast and
my pleasure.
Giving all this knowledge to our listeners.
Absolutely.
That's the mission. Right? Sure. Let's help people from making mistakes to being abused.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So that's all we have for today, folks. I hope you got as much value out of this as we did. Keep in mind, the only way we can improve is through constructive feedback. So remember to rate and review this episode. Also, you are not the only person that needs to know this super valuable information. So be sure to subscribe and share as well. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember to always spread abundance. Peace.